Welcome to the Group Dentistry Now show, the voice of the DSO industry. Join us as we talk with industry leaders about their challenges, successes, and the future of group dentistry. With over 200 episodes and listeners in over 100 countries, we're proud to be ranked the #1 DSO podcast. For the latest DSO news, analysis, and events, and to subscribe to our DSO weekly e-newsletter, visit groupdentistrynow.com. We hope you enjoyed today's show.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Group Dentistry Now show. I'm Bill Newman, and as always, we appreciate you joining us today. Always have such great topics and guests to talk about and talk with. We're going to focus on orthodontic diagnostics and workflow standardization. And Danny, you can certainly chime in here, but it seems like there's been a real big focus on DSOs bringing specialty into their practices as of late. And it's this move from mergers and acquisition to doing more in the existing practices that they already have. And that includes doing more specialty. Orthodontics seems to be, if not at the top, right at the top of priorities for, their, whether they have orthodontists in their groups or whether they're looking to have their general practitioners do more orthodontic work. So it's going to be a great conversation, I think. I'm excited to talk about it. And we have with us Danny Abraham. He is the CEO and founder of Orca Dental AI, and they are the developer of the FDA-cleared CephX platform. What's really cool about their platform and the organization is that they are in, I think I've got this right, over 80 countries right now. You have clinicians using the solution. So this is for all of our listeners, not just our US-based listeners. But Danny, it's great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Bill. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited to share a little bit about my journey and about what Orca has to offer and the way we understand the market and hopefully the way we can contribute and help this space. Not only of the DSOs, there's also the OSOs, which is basically the same thing, just dedicated to orthodontics. But both are obviously potential customers of ours. And yeah, I would love to, again, share my journey, share what we're doing, and maybe just a little bit about myself and the company.
Please.
Yeah, so I grew up with the father as an orthodontist, so kind of from the sidelines. I saw my dad kind of struggle, or at least the challenges of orthodontics in the whole field. And then I got my Master of Science degree and kind of meshed the two pieces of knowledge together and created CephX, or Orca rather. CephX is the brand name. And the company has been dedicated to AI, bringing the AI kind of evolution to dentistry in general, but kind of specifically to orthodontics. It started off as a technician-based kind of local solution, but then fast forward to 2017, we spun off to a technology-based company, and fast forward to today, we serve thousands of clinicians worldwide, as you said, in 80 countries, DSOs, imaging, and PMS solutions, aligner providers, just pretty much everybody along the value chain of the space. And as you say, we're FDA cleared in both 2D and 3D imaging, have a huge data set, and are operating in 80 countries. So yeah, it's definitely been an interesting ride.
Well, maybe before we get started, I'm really curious to get your perspective on things. How have you seen orthodontics really change since the founding of your organization to now? It seems a lot more technology focused than it used to be. And what does that learning curve look like for some of the DSOs out there?
Well, I would say in general, dentistry, and again, specifically orthodontics, there's been huge, and still is, a huge shift towards digital processes with regards to what happens inside the practice. So, a lot of things that used to be done manually and kind of off the computer are now done online or through these through software programs or different tools that allow this digital flow to take place, which makes things much more efficient on the one hand, but then suddenly there's so much more focus on processes that are not related to chair time, and they're necessary and they've become kind of standard, so you have to do them, but then they create this bottleneck, and also there's a much wider scope of the way practices do things. So if you're talking about DSOs that acquire different practices, and you've got a much bigger spread of systems and procedures, and it becomes a challenge of how to unify these things and centralize them and standardize them. So yeah, the change is definitely being, again, internally in the practice. Probably the biggest change is being the digital processes, and of course the aligner business, which has become a huge part of the industry, is part of that kind of evolution.
Well, you mentioned efficiency, and of course, that's always one of the things that comes to mind as being one of the most, important, right? Everything's important to groups and DSOs, but in particular, they're looking for ways to be more efficient. Whether it's consistency across multiple locations. There's some challenges now still with staffing, right? We continue to see challenges there. So let's talk a little bit about how the CephX platform really helps with consistency in diagnostics, because it's something that these DSOs want to be, and I think emerging groups too. So not just the large OSOs out there, but a lot of the smaller orthodontic groups that exist are really looking for ways to just become more and more efficient.
Right, absolutely. So I think the efficiency question kind of caters or um, it is kind of directly related to what I mentioned before. When you have multiple locations and you have all these digital processes taking place, the question is, how do you unify them? How do you get rid of the lack of standardization? How do you have access and auditing abilities? And in general, a lot of these problems can be solved with AI. So AI is kind of unexpectedly an interesting tool to be able to solve a lot of these problems. So when you don't have a objective ground truth, and when you don't have consistency, and you're subject to a lot of volatility, which is kind of tied into the human experience, right? We're all subjective and we all make decisions that can change. And I think there's even been studies that show that dentists will agree with themselves only 30% of the times if they are, tested, or if they look at the same case a week later. So that's a huge kind of indicator of how subjective thinking and subjective analytics or analyzing of cases and issues can change when it's only done without any ground truth and stable system to help you out with that. So I think regarding efficiency, those are a lot of the problems that arise. And AI is just a great tool to be a kind of constant ground truth that doesn't change. It doesn't mean it's, necessarily always the way you want to go, or you definitely, automatically agree with what what are the results it kind of displays, but at least that it's objective, and that it's not going to change its mind, and that if you feed it a case, it's always going to give you the same objective ground truth. So yeah, it's kind of a way to solve that inconsistency problem.
What about things like compliance and different regulations, does the CephX help out with that? Because that can be, a real challenge, especially with, again, we think of the scale that groups have and the knowledge base that a lot of, clinicians and non-clinicians have by practice to practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we're seeing this trend of compliance and more stringent regulation requirements, both from insurers, but also medical legal requirements from, it can be anywhere from the state to the courts and so on. The problem is that kind of efficient record taking and efficient, again, we go back to standardization, is very difficult, especially in the DSO space, because the acquisition of different practices causes like this fragmentation of how things are done and which systems are operating. And then if there's a requirement that you need to now kind of get your practitioners and your clinicians to start adhering to, it's hard to police and it's hard to enforce. And one of the ways to overcome that is to introduce systems that automate the whole process. So it kind of reduces the friction between the clinics and what the organization wants. And that's where CephX and the AI procedures of CephX help basically come in, get your records aligned, get your medical legal standards aligned. And again, there's a lot of examples for insurance, and there's NADP and CADP requirements and so on. And it can even be done, without the practitioner necessarily even having to take part in the whole process. So with some of our customers, we have a entirely transparent process, which just safeguards with regarding to the requirements of these groups like NADP and CADP and legal requirements and so on, because you don't want to be in a situation where there's legal action against you and you're being asked, have you taken all the records necessary in order to live up to the standard of care? And you have to kind of wiggle your way out of it. And this way, using CephX and the automation tools of CephX, you have like the safeguard, which automatically allows you to acquire these records without the friction of having to police it with your clinicians.
Yeah, that's a great point when it comes to insurance auditing. You can almost take the clinician out of it and kind of rely on CephX that's already created this, this record, right? This proof, and not having to rely on, first off, the clinicians, being called to search for something they may or may not have done. So this is
Right.
all categorized and recorded for them. So that's great. Another question that comes up is return on investment. So, the CFOs in the audience and the CEOs are always looking, it's like, okay, this all sounds good, but, what does this look like from, an operational and financial impact, and how you think in particular, like AI solutions, like, CephX can really help when it comes to return on investment?
Sure. So CephX has kind of a number of vectors where we believe there's contribution and then an immediate translation into ROI. So if we're talking about the medical legal side, which we just discussed, you have to think of what is the cost of being non-compliant, getting audited by an insurance company, and being found out that you are not up to par with the standard of care and record taking. And then what happens if you go to court? So all these have a cost, right? Which CephX with your monthly expenditure or annual expenditure, which is a constant, are safeguarded against and mitigated. So that's one angle of the ROI question. Then the other thing is there is the clinical value, since we provide clinical value and improve the actual treatment results, because if you've got better clinical insight and you've got better treatment planning because you have better insight, obviously results are going to be there's going to be more patient satisfaction, which is going to bring in more customers, and which is also going to lead to less retreatment and callbacks and time spent on actually fixing problems. So that's another side of the ROI. And then so we said the legal safeguards, we said the patient satisfaction, and then the last part is what I think I mentioned in the beginning, is the time spent on digital workflows. So because digital workflows have increased so much over the last few years, you're cannibalizing chair time. So the time that is necessary in order to sit down and click whatever you have to click on your systems takes away from your chair time. And the minute you have systems which automate a lot of these workflows, you're getting more chair time, which is, again, that's like the most obvious metric, which increases your bottom line and creates more bang for your buck, basically.
So we've got these more and more complicated tech stacks. It seems like there are more and more solutions that kind of get piled on top of each other, and some talk to each other and some don't talk well to each other, right? So there's those issues there. So it sounds like a great solution, but adding in another solution, how does it integrate? Because we've got a lot of people out there that are like, sounds good, but if it's not going to integrate well with my practice management software or integrate well into my workflow, then I'm not sure this is going to be really beneficial.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And we have an increasing number of integrations, again, with a bunch of different systems. So we integrate with a growing number of PMSs. So that kind of workflow, a lot of the times, is entirely seamless. You just kind of have an extra button in your PMS regarding to the patient, or you can, with some groups, we even have this entirely automated system, which is again transparent to the clinician or staff. So that's one part of it. Then we have integrations also with imaging systems and planning systems, such as like Soda Cloud and Vista, to name a few, that kind of tie in directly to your imaging workflow rather than your patient management workflow. And then the other connection is with X-ray imaging systems. So like Planmeca and Sirona and other systems also have us integrated. And those are usually the entry points into which you're going to want to take your image and convert it into the data that we provide. We also provide aligner companies and different providers in imaging labs and so on, which is a bit of a different entry point. So if you export your data to a third party and receive back information, which can be a treatment plan with aligners, or can be an imaging lab that does CBCT imaging for you and so on, that's another entry point that through which we provide service, but we're really servicing the third-party providers who then pass it on to the clinician and then that can be within the organization as well.
Challenges with scaling orthodontics, specifically when it comes to DSOs. Can you talk about some of those challenges that you've seen and how you're working to try and alleviate some of those issues?
Yeah, sure. So again, I think the biggest challenge seems to be the fragmentation of systems, just because of the way most DSOs obviously grow through the acquisitions of different customers and different clinics. And then each clinic has their own system and procedure and staff that are used to all kinds of things. And then getting them to comply and work with your systems or the way you want it as a DSO and as a group and organization and wants to standardize things, is very difficult. So I mentioned before, automated systems reduce friction, and this friction between management and clinicians or clinics is obviously a challenge for DSOs. Being able to overcome that is a great way where AI really shines and manifests its advantages, because a lot of things can be done, again, transparently. Yeah, I would say that's probably the biggest challenge and one of the biggest contributors of what AI provides.
You touched on this briefly earlier. You talked a little bit about, the clinical contribution that using an AI solution like CephX can really just help out. And it's like you have to think back to a lot of the OSOs and DSOs in general have some younger clinicians that maybe, don't necessarily have the skill sets because they haven't been practicing a long time. So can you talk a little bit about how using a solution that's AI supported can help not just younger clinicians, but maybe some of the more established clinicians when it comes to the outcomes?
Sure. So, I mean, in general, when you talk about radiography, which is a lot of the places where we kind of what CephX and I think AI contributes, is taking images. They can be, again, radiographic images. They can be intraoral scans. They can be images, facial images, and intraoral pictures, and so on. So taking that information and deciphering it as a clinician can leave a lot of missed kind of findings on the table. Again, the human condition, we're all volatile in our decision making. Of course, our focus and attention at 5 p.m. is different than what it is at 9 o'clock in the morning when we're all fresh and so on. So it's subject to our distraction, our focus, our just general condition at the moment, and then it leaves a lot of room for mistake. Having a kind of assistant which shines a light on findings and floats crucial information, says, hey, take a look at this, specific thing that we found. It might be a nothing or it might be a something, but just take a look and note that it's there, goes a long way in improving the level of overall diagnostics. And in general, there's a great example. We just had a recent oral surgeon, who uses our platform, and he's a complete veteran. He's been around for a while, and he's done just a huge amount of cases throughout his life. And he was, he's used to looking at an X-ray and kind of immediately understanding, what's going on without even having to think about it too much. And then he got our results, and he actually spoke to us directly and said, hey, your results, something's wrong there. It doesn't make sense. And what turned out to be was that our AI system kind of automatically rotated the image and aligned it according to the Frankfurt horizontal plane. I won't go into details, but the idea is that it did some kind of automatic maneuver, which we do purposely. And because that maneuver wasn't done initially, and the X-ray was taken in a bad head position, it actually misled the surgeon, with all his experience, to come to an incorrect conclusion. And only after, we realized why he had come to the wrong conclusion and why the AI had actually given him the right conclusion, was a great example for us of how these automations can help even the most experienced practitioner, because you're used to taking a quick look and getting a feel for what's going on, but sometimes your feel isn't accurate even if you're super experienced. So again, that kind of second opinion, that that's extra entity that shines the light on where things may be crucial is super advantageous even for experienced practitioners.
And I think this ties into the, you talked about patient experience as well. So, not only I led with, this is helpful for, orthodontists, both, and clinicians, both, experienced and not really that experienced, but then also even for like the treatment coordinators as well. Can you talk a little bit about how this assists the treatment coordinators, and then I'd like you to then kind of take it to the next step, like from a patient perspective, how is this better for them? And it seems to me, I kind of there's this expectation now that we have as patients, which are customers too, right? So we call them patients, but they're customers, and everything we have AI now in everything that we do. I think most people are pretty familiar with chat. We've got AI on our phones. So I think it's the natural expectations that our clinicians would be using AI to help them and help us as well. So are you starting to see some more of that kind of breakthrough? So I threw three questions
Well,
out at you, but
yeah. What we're seeing in general, and I think this has been a known for quite a while, that in general, patient education and good patient education leads to better case acceptance. And the question has always been, what is good patient education? How do you present the current situation to the patient? Where he's at, and where you want to take him, and what you want to uh, kind of perform in the procedure, and really, what is his journey? Because especially in orthodontics, right, where it's not just a one-time treatment, or it's probably the longest journey of all, right? And that's why I call it a journey, because it's not from now to tomorrow or a week's time. It's now to 16 months time, or 2 years or whatever. And because that journey is complex and kind of requires a commitment to something long term, there's always this basic apprehension. And then the question is, how do you overcome that apprehension? How do you explain to the patient what's going on? How do you really visualize where the patient is and what you want to do? And the best tools for visualizing turn out to be AI, because then you're not just creating an animation saying, well, this is an animation of, we want to extract a couple of teeth and move your maxilla back, and, do whatever. You need to show, this is you. This is properly your structure. This is your anatomy. This is what you look like right now. And on the other hand, this is where we're going. This is what we want you to look like. This is how we want to improve your aesthetics and visuals. So the minute there's a proper, real representation, a visual representation of where we are and where we want to go, there's better understanding. And then when there's better understanding of the destination, there's also better case acceptance. And we've seen that across the board, both in regular dentistry, with other providers, and again, even more so in orthodontics, just because the journey is so long and requires a more, bigger emotional commitment.
So as we start to wrap up this podcast, this is fascinating. I love technology and AI, and it's moving so rapidly. It's really hard to keep up with things. So
Yeah.
this is the crystal ball question for you, which might be difficult, but if we're looking at 5 years out, 2031, maybe take us from the end of this year, what the progress will be, to 2031. What are the changes that you see for your solution, CephX, and then also just AI in general for dentistry?
What I see is, first of all, ubiquity. So if today AI is something that is kind of cool and nice to have, and everybody's talking about it, and it's the industry buzzword and so on, and I think practitioners are beginning to see not only as something, to show off and say, hey, we've got the newest and latest and best technologies, but real proper value, again, both on the clinical side, but also on the organizational side. So 5 years from now, it's just going to be a given. It's not going to be something that as a clinician or as an organization, you're going to contemplate if you want to have. So I really believe that it's kind of going to be just a given that is part of your planning and coordinating procedures. And then, I mean, the clinician will always be the decision maker and the authority, and the executioner of the plan. But the tools and ability to take the data, which is thus far has been available, and make it accessible, and there's a huge difference between the two, is just going to be a natural. So data is going to be, the crucial data is going to be super accessible, right in your face. And as a clinician, you'll be able to make a much wiser and more predictable treatment plan. And at the end of the day, patient treatment and outcome is just going to be increasingly better. You're going to have more satisfied patients, less recalls, and just better orthodontics and better dentistry across the board.
Excellent. So what are you all working on? What do you have any interesting things you can talk about as far as improvements or some really, I guess anything you can talk to us about that maybe coming down the pipe?
Oh, we've got a huge amount. Our focus now is also a lot on 3D procedures. So when we say 3D procedures, we're talking about CBCT and intraoral scans and what you can do with them and unlock the huge amounts of data that are kind of embedded in both of them. So we've already got interesting tools and automations regarding these image types, but we're actually increasing them and creating all kinds of really interesting tools also in the clinic, on the clinical level, on the ease of use level, on the automation level. If you take an example of imagery, it's the most basic example of what an orthodontist has to do in order to acquire images and put them in his practice management. So he has to go through all the images he's taken of the patient, put them usually in a specific order. Sometimes there's a few images per patient of the same type, so you have to decide which one you want to use. Then kind of upload them into your system. Then you have to label them. Then you have to crop them and rotate them and align them in a template. I mean, oh my God, there's such a long procedure. And, with our system, it's just click and it's all done automatically. So, as far as time saving is even concerned, above and beyond just the clinical stuff, just the time saving and ability to, focus on the clinical chair time and not on the digital processes, which happen now seamlessly. There's a lot of effort that we're putting in to make these things happen. So yeah, both on 2D, 3D, and digital processes, a lot of interesting things and automations coming out.
Well, thanks, Danny. Great conversation. If people want to learn more about Orca Dental AI or CephX, how do they do so?
Oh, sure. Well, you can just email me directly at Danny, DANNY, at CephX.com. And I'll be happy to answer any questions or, set up a demo or whatever is required.
Excellent. And yeah, so the website address, the URL is CephX, which is CEPHX.com. Very simple. We'll put it in the show notes. We'll also drop Danny's email address in there. Again, that's pretty simple too. It's Danny@CephX.com. So can't make it much easier. And yeah, I think we're at the point now where, a lot of these AI solutions aren't interesting. We'll wait and see. I mean, I think, looking at like we're there, we need to start using these to help our clinicians and help our practices out, because we're in an interesting time, I think, when it comes to group practices and DSOs, the heyday of acquisitions, that's past. Now we're looking at, the groups that have been built and how do you become more efficient, offer more value to your customers, and I think offer more value and more solutions to your clinicians as well. And CephX is a perfect example of something that, is easily integrated into the workflow solutions. It's going to help out, not only, the clinicians, but, give better patient outcomes. And I think from the ROI perspective, it sounds like a great solution. So thank you, Danny. Really appreciate your time. And thank you everyone for watching us today. Until next time, this is the Group Dentistry Now Show.
Thanks a lot. I really appreciate the time and the platform. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast to stay up to date on the latest DSO news, insights, and events. Also, subscribe to our DSO weekly e-newsletter at groupdentistrynow.com.